the ancient slopes of an evergreen valley where the chill winds from the north moaned like lost souls, there resided a goddess revered across many clans. Tales of her prowess as a huntress had travelled with the herons that sailed the high skies and the salmon that returned to the winding rivers each year. Her name was Argana, and her bow was said to strike truer than any mortal archer alive. Grass and heather always sprang up in the footprints of her hounds. A single cry from Argana could summon fear among the mightiest kings, for she dwelled in the realm between the living and the spectral, commanding forces mysterious and ancient. Argana lived atop a craggy cliff where the forest turned rocky, passing into less forgiving terrain. An arrow shot away stood an oak so old that no one remembered when it sprouted. At its roots, thick and gnarled, a cave mouth opened. Within lay Argana's personal sanctum, a place known only in whispers, for most mortal eyes never beheld it. The interior was lit by a peculiar radiance, a mingling of flickering lanterns and sunlight refracted through crystals in the stone ceiling. Here, Argana kept her huntsman's tools, her collection of relics from past victories, and, most notably, an enchanted mirror bestowed upon her by an otherworldly lineage. This mirror rested on a polished stump in the deepest recesses of her lair. Its burnished bronze rim and swirling runic carvings gave it the appearance of a gateway lost in time. Some believed it was shaped from the single piece of metal iced by the blood of dragons. Others swore it was once part of a Celtic war shield that had glimpsed armies tumbling into battle. Argana alone knew its true origin. It had once been a looking glass for the shape-shifting guardians of a forgotten realm, where reflection and reality intertwined. Over centuries, the mirror had changed hands, always accompanied by a caution to respect its power. Argana approached the mirror with reverence. Whenever she needed guidance or glimpsed an uncertain future, she might peer into its depths, seeking signs in the faint glimmers that danced across the surface. Yet, ominous warnings had also been etched into dreams she had over the years. She was cautioned never to let her reflection remain too long, for that reflection could develop a will of its own and find itself able to slip free, forging a mischief that threatened the harmony of the wild land she protected. One moonlit evening, Argana was drawn to the mirror more strongly than usual. The night skies were alive with spiraling ribbons of green and purple light, and stray stardust fell like fleeting diamonds. No simple, starry event stirred her curiosity. The voice of the stream near her cavern had changed notes, humming with a disquiet reminiscent of unsettled spirits. Sensing something was afoot, Argana lit a single candle and placed it beside the mirror. Its gentle flame cast her face in half-light, illuminating the proud arch of her eyebrows and the calculating intensity in her eyes. She peered into the mirror, half believing the old warnings to be superstitions. Her own reflection gazed back with regal composure. But as she continued to stare, a jarring dissonance shuddered through her. Her reflection was not simply staring back, it was moving, subtly, with a motion that resisted Argana's own posture, as though its actions were no longer bound by the goddess's physical gestures. She blinked, trying to dispel what appeared to be a trick of the dim light, yet the reflection remained, its face twisted into a grin that was not her own. Sharp, wild, and hungry. A sudden, thunderous crack jolted through the cavern. The mirror's surface rippled like water. Before Argana could summon her bow or recite a protective incantation, her reflection slid out from the glass and landed on the cavern floor. It stood there. An eerie doppelganger, identical in height and stature, but emanating an odd gloom. Argana clenched her fists. She felt a sudden emptiness within her chest, as if that reflection had siphoned a fragment of her soul. For a fraction of a heartbeat, both goddess and reflection locked eyes. Then the figure darted out of the cavern, weaving beyond the old oak's roots and into the swirling tapestry of moonlight and shadow. Racked by alarm, Argana sprinted behind it, but the reflection moved with all her speed and cunning, no, perhaps even more, given its new-found freedom. Argana lost sight of it among the twisted trunks and thick undergrowth. Never had she felt so much confusion. The protective wards around her lair, meant to keep intruders at bay, had been powerless against the reflection's escape. If it roamed unchecked, it might terrorize the wood, ravage the mortal realm, or incite chaos across realms unseen. Argana paused, breath steaming in the chill air, mind spinning with questions. She sensed at once that this was not a foe she could track by normal means. It was, after all, an aspect of her own being. Possessing the same cunning and knowledge of camouflage, venturing deeper into the moonlit forest, she considered her options. Although renowned for her personal prowess, Argana truly shone when joined by her companions, the Spectral Hounds. They were not ordinary dogs, but creatures bound by pacts older than the forest, grey and white in colour, with eyes lit by pale fire. Gathering her resolve, Argana took out a piece of polished bone from a pouch at her side. Tentative and grave, she brought it to her lips and released a short series of resonant notes. The sound curled through the night air, weaving between branches and rolling over mossy ground like a whisper of winter winds. Moments later, howls broke the silence. One by one, the spectral hounds appeared. Their approach was swift, yet ethereal, as though their paws scarcely touched the ground. The leader of the pack was a large hound named Phaelin, an ancient beast who had served Argana for generations of mortal lives. They appeared in a crescent formation around their goddess, shimmering faintly in the dark, their eyes fixed upon Argana, recognizing that her summons spoke of an urgent venture. She raised her head, summoning measured authority. "A piece of me has fled," she said in the secret language the hounds shared with her. "It be reclaimed, for it threatens the balance of this realm." The pack needed no other explanation. The pack lived for the hunt, and this was their goddess's most vital command to date. With a nod, Phaelin pressed his muzzle to Argana's hand, absorbing the scent that remained from the reflection's departure. Instantly his hackles rose and his phosphorescent eyes burned with the thrill of pursuit. He let out a low growl and the rest of the pack responded in unison, an otherworldly chorus echoing among the trees. The forest itself seemed to recoil from the sound, silent in awe or fear. Then the chase began. The spectral hounds darted forward, led by Phaelin, whose nose twitched at intangible threads connecting Argana and her reflection. Argana glided close behind, her keen eyes scanning the tree line for any trace of an ethereal presence. Wisps of nocturnal fog curled against their legs, weaving illusions underfoot and escalating the sense of urgency in the air. Owls blinked and retreated deeper into their hollows, unwilling to witness or interfere. They soon reached the outskirts of the forest, where a jagged, ancient road cut through. Centuries ago, it might have served as a trade route. Now it was a neglected path, overshadowed by brambles and bent hawthorn trees. Phaelin sniffed around the base of these hawthorns, letting out an anguished yelp. The reflection's tracks ended there. Argana knelt and pressed her hand into the cool earth, straining to sense any leftover presence. The soil was eerily silent, as if the reflection had severed any link to the goddess's detection. Patience, she reminded herself. A huntress rushes not. She rose, studying the silhouettes of her hounds in the pale moonlight. "Fan out," she ordered in their wordless tongue. "Check for illusions." The hounds obeyed, splitting into smaller groups, each sniffing the air for the faintest whiff of the reflection's essence. Some loped ahead, while others circled back into the woods. Argana searched for any break in the patterns of leaves or the slightest magical residue in the air. She found none. Just as she mulled whether the reflection might have doubled back, she glimpsed a faint glimmer at the far edge of the road, a distortion like a shimmer of heat in the distance. She whistled softly, and Phaelin sprang to her side. Together they advanced. As they drew near, the distortion sharpened into a figure that looked unnervingly familiar, although its face remained in shadow. The stance was hers powerful legs, ready to draw an arrow, hair twisting around the shoulders in the night breeze. It looked at her with a half-smile. For several heartbeats, Argana and her reflection locked gazes once more. A tingling apprehension coursed through her. What would it mean to seize or destroy a reflection that had awakened to an independent existence? The reflection spoke, voice velvet smooth, a twisted echo of Argana's own. You would bind me again? I am the unacknowledged half of your being. My freedom is my right. Argana grasped her bow. You are a danger to the realms, for you draw upon my power but are guided by no sense of duty. Return to whence you came, or face consequences. A wry laugh reverberated through the still air. Consequences? You are as bound to me as I am to you. Perhaps we should see who truly holds dominion. With remarkable speed, the reflection leaped backward, then scattered into a pack of illusions, each shaping itself into a pack of illusions, doping the senses. Phylan lunged forward, his fangs gnashing at the illusions. He tore through one after another, only to find they vanished into mist. Argana loosed an arrow at another silhouette that had begun to sprint away, but her arrow merely buried itself in the trunk of a pine. Meanwhile, the illusions spiraled among the trees, each flickering with the reflection's unmistakable grin. In desperation, Argana reached down through the bond she shared with her hounds, rallying every ounce of their cunning. The illusions, though convincing, lacked the genuine scent of life. Patiently, Phelan and the spectral pack sniffed the air, ignoring the illusions' forms and focusing on intangible energies. The illusions began to fade as truth overcame trickery. Yet, in the confusion, the real reflection had fled. Again! Argana let out a frustrated exhale, looking to her hounds. They regrouped, silent but expectant. She had known the reflection might wield portions of her divine power, though not to this extent. The reflection was liberated from restraint, apparently fueled by all the impulses Argana had carefully suppressed through discipline. If not stopped, it might unravel the fragile pacts Argana had made with mortal tribes and with spirits of the forest. With a sign to her spectral companions, Argana pressed on, and they moved deeper into uncharted territory, where the forest gave way to a hillside of ancient stones. The stones were arranged in a pattern suggesting they had once served as ritual pillars. Some were upright, crowned by swirling lichen. Others lay toppled, half buried in the earth. The energy here was tangibly heaving with latent power. Often, Argana had avoided entering this place, for these old stones marked boundaries between worlds, opening ephemeral doorways best left alone. But her reflection's footprints were visible along the dew-laden grass, faint but present. Shadows slipped between the stones, and Argana caught sight again of the reflection's silhouette. A bitter wind whipped across the hill, pushing her hair into her face. She advanced, nocking an arrow, each step alert. Her hounds circled, forming a ring of spectral light that cut off possible escape routes. The reflection pivoted, feigning surprise to see them so soon. "You persist," it said with that mocking grin. "But perhaps you should ask yourself, why do you restrain me? If we are one and the same, can you kill me without killing yourself?" Argana's heart pounded. The reflection was right. Forcibly destroying it might carry unforeseen consequences for her own essence. As a being that existed beyond mortality, she was uncertain how severing an aspect of her spirit might affect her. Still, she could not allow that aspect to roam free, sowing discord. The reflection's madness was not tempered by Argana's moral anchor. Worse yet, that ravenous energy seemed to magnetize the primal powers buried beneath the ancient pillars. Suddenly, a series of violet sparks erupted around the reflection. The air crackled and shimmered, and an opening in the fabric of the world began to form between two of the standing stones. The reflection turned, prepared to step through an otherworldly gateway. Argana realized it was trying to escape beyond the mortal realm. If it crossed over, it might open new wells of power, or, worse, invite destructive forces back into the realm with it. Drawing upon her sacred bond, Argana commanded her hounds. Phelan sped ahead, howling with a force that rippled the grass. One hound leaped at the reflection's heels, but the reflection twisted gracefully away. Another hound lunged, jaws open in a haze of luminous fangs. Though it clamped down, the reflection tore free in a swirl of dark vapor, leaving the hound momentarily confused. Argana could feel her own chest tighten at the echo of the pain. In one fluid motion, Argana fired her arrow at the swirling gateway. The projectile, imbued with her divine sense of purpose, lodged itself at the exact nexus of the energies. The purple glow flickered wildly, then waned, sealing the passage. The reflection let out a snarl as its exit route vanished. It spun and faced Argana, pale eyes ablaze with simmering fury. Argana lowered her bow. "You will not invade the other world," she declared. "If you hunger for mischief, you shall face me here." The reflection's lips curled into a sardonic smirk. Then, with a deep breath, it issued a challenging roar. The ground beneath them quaked, cracks weaving across the hillside in rapid lines. The old stones groaned. Mushrooms sprouted in wild patches, releasing spores into the night. Ancient energies seeped from the fissures, and a ring of arcane mist began to swirl around the reflection. Argana realized with a jolt what it was doing, channeling the raw magic of the land for its own ends. A wave of force slammed into the goddess and her hounds. Phelan skittered backward, claws raking the soil, while Argana braced herself with one knee bent, her brow furrowed with effort. She rummaged through her arsenal of incantations, searching for a means to pin down her reflection without ripping her own soul to pieces. Gathering her courage, she raised both arms high. Wind whipped around her, swirling leaves and dust into a vortex. She began to chant. The words older than mortal memory reverberated in a commanding melody. The runes etched along her bracelets glimmered. The spectral hounds responded by howling in harmony, their glowing eyes now pools of unearthly resolve. A subtle friction in the air, a sense of resistance, revealed the reflection struggling against her incantation. The reflection recognized the goddess's tactic. Unify the fractured piece of soul, forcing them to reconnect. But unification was the last thing the reflection desired. Gouts of wild magic roiled from the reflection's figure, shifting color from a deep amethyst to a virulent green. Bolts of lightning crackled outward, striking the ground with relentless ferocity. Argana's hair stood on end. The spectral hounds weaved around each bolt with near impossible agility, aided by their intangible forms, yet each blast ate away at Argana's strength. Lessening her chant for a moment, she conjured a swirl of protective energy, forging it into a tangible net of shimmering lines. She hurled it forward. The reflection attempted to dodge, but Phelan blocked its path, snapping at its heels. Argana's net closed around her estranged form, luminous threads trapped. However, capturing it physically only half solved the problem. If the reflection was to be sealed, it must be subdued within Argana's essence. Undaunted, the reflection glared, tension in its shoulders. Then it roared again, channeling an explosive pulse of arcane force that shredded the net and forced Phelan to recoil with a pained whimper. The reflection's face twisted in triumphant rage. The moment's victory was short-lived, however. Argana pressed her advantage, channeling divine energy straight through the ground beneath the reflection's feet. Tendrils of mesmerizing light erupted from the cracks in the earth, coiling around the reflection's ankles like glowing vines. Caught off guard, the reflection stumbled. It launched blasts of magic at these vines, but Argana's chant strengthened them. Unbreakable in that instant, they climbed the reflection's body, binding its arms, bending them in on themselves. "Fear! Release me!" hissed the reflection, voice quivering with desperation. "You deny part of yourself. This will only breed more darkness." Argana stepped forward with measured calm, though her heart hammered in her chest. She reached out her hand, palm extended. The reflection recoiled, but the binding vines held it firmly. With trembling resolve, Argana pressed her palm to her reflection's chest. A tempest of swirling energies rushed through her. She saw fragments of her life, her hunts, her alliances, her lost regrets, reflected in her twins' frantic eyes. Memories they both shared, now twisted by the reflection's desire to stand independent. The goddess inhaled deeply, recalling the words from an ancient vow. To protect the balance of nature, including the balance within herself, she realized that if she continued to shun the part of her being that had manifested as this reflection, she might well face this threat again. The reflection was a part of her, the unrestrained, chaotic impulses that she had always sought to subdue in her roles as protector and guardian. Softly, she began a new chant, different in toneless, of a binding and more of a reconciliation. The vines shimmering around the reflection shifted from a harsh glow to a calmer radiance. The reflection's breathing grew ragged. Images flickered in its eyes. The lonely nights Argana spent on vigil, the heartbreak of seeing wounded creatures, the suppressed rage at mortal transgressions. Each wound in Argana's past had contributed to the formation of this rebellious embodiment. Now, with the chant guiding them, they began to merge. Argana felt an electric shock run through her when the reflection's form dissolved into motes of pale light. At first it resisted, swirling violently, pushing against her. She braced herself, anchored by the presence of her spectral hounds, who continued their melodic howling. Gradually, the reflection's energy merged into Argana's chest, and she felt a profound wave of disorientation, as if something jagged and raging were filling a chamber in her heart. For a beat, her vision whited out. She stumbled, leaning into Phylan's steady flank for support. When she opened her eyes again, the swirling energies had dissipated. The reflection was gone, and in its place was only the hush of the hillside in the quiet gloom of night. Weakness washed over Argana's limbs, and she sank to her knees, exhausted by this spiritual confrontation. Phylan approached, nudging her with a gentle muzzle. She placed a hand on the spectral hound's head, grateful for its unwavering loyalty. The rest of the pack formed a wide circle around her, ensuring the area was secure. In due time, Argana rose. An unmistakable shift had occurred in the depths of her soul. She felt both reclaimed power and a hint of what the reflection had carried, a raw, unleashed spark of her own primeval nature. It coursed through her, not as a destructive force, but as a reminder of the balance she must maintain within herself. The goddess called her pack together, whispering her thanks. The spectral hounds, though silent, emanated a sense of approval. The intangible bond connecting them felt stronger than ever, renewed through the shared struggle. They guided her back along the remnants of the old road, into the deeper forest. The journey was long and slow. Argana's steps grew heavier by the moment, for her mind was burdened with the knowledge gleaned from the clash. Eventually, they reached the familiar oak at her lair's entrance. The ancient tree swayed gently, as if greeting its mistress. Argana passed through the cavern mouth, each step echoing on the stone. Re-entering her sanctum, she found the enchanted mirror unscathed, its surface still rippling faintly. The reflection was nowhere to be seen in it. It had been absorbed. And for the first time in decades, the mirror seemed almost tranquil, like a still pond at dawn. She approached the mirror with new caution. Setting one hand against the cool surface, she peered in. Her reflection reappeared, matching her posture. She searched for a hint of the mocking grin, or the rebellious flicker that had once set the reflection apart. She found none. Instead, her own face stared back with an emotion that felt foreign, yet comforting. Acceptance. She had reclaimed what had been cast out. She recognized that living with her own darker facets, acknowledging and reconciling with them, was healthier than allowing them to fester in secrecy. Turning away from the mirror, Argana settled onto a carved stone seat. Phylan and the other hounds laid themselves down around the edges of the chamber, resting their heads on their paws. The space was filled with an ethereal calm, as though the storm had finally passed. She recalled the reflection's final words about darkness taking root when denied. She sensed the ring of truth in them, unwilling as she was to condone the reflection's destructive means. Outside, dawn's light began to creep into the sky, painting the cave's entrance with pale pink and gold. Argana sat in reflective silence, hearing the soft breathing of her spectral companions. She understood that the mirror and its powers needed renewed protection. Perhaps she would craft new wards, ones that recognized the integral importance of confronting one's own shadow. She leaned forward, pressing the palm of her hand against her chest, feeling the reassuring steadiness of her heartbeat. Though weariness tugged at her eyelids, there was a small, resolute smile on her lips. No chase through forest shadows would soon be forgotten, nor would she underestimate the potency of reflection and self-awareness. Her next steps involved forging a deeper harmony with the forces she both nurtured and commanded. In the days that followed, the forest carried on with its usual rhythms. Crows cawed from treetops, does nursed their fawns by hidden brooks, and subtle breezes murmured through oaks and hawthorns alike. Yet something in the wood's undercurrent had shifted, a quiet calm, as if the land recognized Argana's rebalancing. Her hunts continued, guided by respect for every living creature, as she felt the reflection's power coiling inside her own, ready to be used wisely. Those mortals who occasionally glimpsed Argana in their travels marveled at a sudden grace that seemed more luminous than before. She was still the huntress, still rumored to command an otherworldly pack of hounds, but there was a softened trace to her stance, a deeper understanding in the cast of her eyes. One legend claimed that the goddess of the hunt had wrestled her own shadow in a star-kissed forest and tamed it by the bonds of self-acceptance. Others clung to older stories, whispering that her reflection had spun into the night, never to be caught. But Argana herself knew the truth. The nights remained her domain, and the moon still guided her paths over heather and hollow. The spectral hounds trailed close, guardians of realms beyond mortal comprehension. At times, Argana might wander the old hillside of standing stones, recalling the epic confrontation. Yet never did she betray the knowledge that she had gained, for in the ephemeral silver of her mirror's surface, and in the running souls of her hounds, Argana's spirit endured, whole, wiser, and ever prepared for mysteries yet to come.